Well, I have to say I'm really, really honored that you guys came in, because I thought if nobody comes in, I'll actually go and see Troy Hunt's presentation myself, but thank you very much for coming. So my name is Galiya Warrior, and today we're going to talk a little bit about chatbots, and we're going to discuss what is this whole hype about it, what is the challenges and opportunities right now in this space. So among, 8 of you, how many of you actually did talk to a bot? Talk to a bot. Yeah? Okay, cool. Did you develop anything for the bot? Aaron, I know you mentioned you did. You tried? Okay. Right, okay, that's good. So hopefully I'll show you what you can do and how you can go about that. So first of all, so what are chatbots? It's something which is a user's conversation as an interface, and they usually function on the top of messaging platforms. There are lots of names. They were known for a while under lots of names. So at the moment, chatbots is the sort of standard in the industry, but again, it might change in 5 years' time, who knows? There used to be chatterbox, talkbots, artificial conversational entities even, which is impossible to pronounce. But main thing about the chatbots, they are perceived to be intelligent, whether it's based on some rules US developers provide, and rule-based agents, or it might be some artificial intelligence backend there. And as you can see, Dilbert already nailed it on that. If you look at the history, very briefly, so 1950s, this is where it all starts with Alan Turing's papers, computing, machinery, and intelligence. So the Turing test, the whole question of can machine think. And actually, this is where it's all started. So chatbots is nothing new, really. It's all back then in 50s. The first major rise of chatbots was in 60s and 70s with the maybe so-called classic bots now. And it was obviously done mostly in research institutes, MIT, Stanford, etc. So the two main examples you may have heard of is Eliza Doctor, which was a scripted conversation from the point of view of a psychotherapist. So you could actually have a conversation as if you're talking to a psychotherapist, and he would actually reply to you with using those early language, natural language processing tools back then. And it was, at that point, it was really, really exciting and very cool, the way it was replying. It was almost like a human was replying. And then in 72, Stanford University, so they were joking a little bit, but they created another person, Perry. It was a simulation of a person with a paranoid schizophrenia. And again, you could talk to this person, so he would emulate the behavior of person with this mental illness. And you might want to ask, did they actually meet? And they met quite a few times at some conferences back then, and I think it was 1972, one of the best ones, when they actually talked over the APRANET, and they had a proper conversation between themselves. So this was back in 60s, 70s. Then fast forward 15 years, 20 years, so 1990s, we got the general bots, which we all knew, those sort of mainstream bots, the customer services, that IKEA bot, that Anna service was very, very simple in reply, but it was still, useful. Then there would be, call centers, romance apps, interestingly enough, dating apps, well, application at that point, whatever they were, conversational toys, which I was surprised, but again, there was some early natural language processing backends there. And also, the Turing test, which was based on the Turing's paper, so there was actually Loebner Prize has been established to give money to an application, to a chatbot, which could actually trick the human into believing it's human. So till now, it still hasn't been reached out. So that milestone hasn't been reached, but it's been held every year so far. And then another type of bots, which became popular at that point, were some of the malicious bots on the instant messaging. The fun fact I found out, I didn't know that, but Wikipedia apparently runs about 2,000 bots to actually maintain the state of the, of the Wikipedia, which is, I think, pretty cool. And it's been there for a while. It's nothing new. And then, last year, 2016, still very fresh, we came to the point where, there was an explosion. So Satya Nadella, says bots are the new apps, March 2016. Facebook releases the bot framework around the same time. Also, I think it was in March. They have a bot engine hosted by the artificial intelligence company called Wheat.ai. Microsoft releases the now infamous Stateless and takes it back very quickly, takes it off. And then launches of the cognitive services. I don't know if some of you have been today at Jennifer's talk, so she was talking about cognitive services. Then Oracle was there in September, Google was there in May. Everybody pretty much was suddenly emerging in that space. And O'Reilly is one of the famous conference providers, conference organizers. So they actually held a bot day in October last year on the topic of bots, which I guess, again, gives that validation. It's actually very important in the industry right now. The reason why it is important and why it became so important now is that there's some research has been done recently. Apparently, 85% of customers' time on smartphone is actually spent within the 5 apps. And those 5 apps might be different between you and me, but essentially they would be within the category of messaging, social networking, games. So that's where we spend most of our time, apparently, on the smartphones these days. And people like to chat. We all use our devices for that. Again, some statistics just for your knowledge. So 32% of global population is now on social media. The growth of the number of mobile messages sent between 2012, in 2012 it was around 15 trillion messages. This year, 2017, it's about 30 trillion messages, so it's exploding again. And most of those messages done through the messaging platform or applications. And so all other factors which are important is that users, we all tired of the searching of this yet new application on the App Store or any other store, and we're bound to our top 10 and top 20 probably, and that's it. So we don't really use anymore. And this is from the opposite side. When you're a mobile application developer, how do you actually make your application visible? It's really hard these days now. And the last, and I think is also a very, very important point why bots are so prominent now, is those advanced natural language processing tools, as well as other capabilities on the AI space, but the NLP is one of the most important for bots. So they are now available in a very easy way for developers to use in their applications. And again, if you've seen Jen's talk on cognitive service, or you're going to watch it later online, take a look, because she actually shows the Microsoft toolkit on that and how easy you could actually bring it together with your applications. And the important bit, why is it, what are the opportunities for the companies now, for the businesses? First of all, we are on messaging apps, so brands want to be there. They want to be where we are, so that's main point for them. Then some of the ideas around customer service has been already bubbling out, and can you make a customer service simpler in a way that if I come to a bot and if I come to that service and actually I ask a very simple question coming from my FAQ, do I really need a human to respond to that, or can it be automated? However, if there is some request which might be much more complicated, need to be dealt by a human, then you might want to reroute to a human. And to make things even better, if that question is angry or somebody is not very happy about the service, maybe we need to top it up in the queue, so that person gets attention much quicker. So there are opportunities in that space. We all know companies have a lot of internal data sources, internal data systems, and quite often they are not the best to use, and they're quite clunky, lots of steps to do something. Booking your vacations might be taking 5, 10 steps, and if there's something quicker can be done and make employees productive in the workspace, that is another opportunity. And all sorts of innovations coming out now. Maybe there are some examples you think of are possible in that space around text and voice interaction, around using those AI capabilities, how you build them up together, making better use of what you have right now, the data you have, and how do you expose it to the internally or external world. And one of the just recent reports, literally last week it was released, so 80% of marketing leaders actually want to have chatbots or some AI capability by 2020, which is, very soon actually, so we better to look at the space and see what we can do. But this is more for the businesses. And if we think from the developers' point of view, so what are the opportunities for developers? First of all, the chatbot application itself, it's a service you create once, and you maintain it, you deploy it, but it's a one piece. It's not a challenge of having iOS code, Android code, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all in one place. And then you can actually expose it to those different channels where customers are, whether it's a Facebook Messenger, whether it's Slack, whether it's Skype, and whatever else might be. So this is that opportunity for developers. Also, because users use those chat platforms already, so you don't really need to introduce a new sort of way of dealing with your application. So it's Slack interface is familiar to them, Skype, they know how to use it, and so on. And again, APIs using the NLP, using search, using, I don't know, vision APIs, etc. So all of those opportunities are there for developers. Question is, would bots be used for everything? And Satya Nadella, bots are new apps. Is it really true? Probably not. We need to be very conscious of that, because bots are not. Bots are good at some things, but they are not particularly great at other things. So when we develop that, we develop those applications. We need to keep this in mind. So they are good at something which is very sequential. For instance, there are a number of options, and one of the examples is there's a lawyer bot which allows you to appeal for your parking. It actually was quite popular in the UK, I think, last year or two. So you can actually, if you got a parking ticket, you can go to that website and it will ask you a few questions, and then it will just send an appeal to the council. And you actually might get, that parking ticket completely taken off you. Also, they are good for the sort of simulating conversation, which we already know as a conversation. Ordering your pizza, booking an appointment, these sort of things, again, they are very predefined. We know exactly what's the outcome. It's a very, there's a goal I need to achieve, and there are steps which are known there. Maybe some of the non-time critical queries also could be done through bots. I don't know, booking a restaurant, booking a movie, movie tickets, for instance, it could be done as well. But it's not, I want to do it now, but something like, I want to do it, maybe on Sunday I want to go to a movie, so what are the options? And you can go through those options, iterate, etc., through the bot. However, there are some scenarios where bots will not be good. An application will probably be still a good choice. Booking a taxi for 4 o'clock today, or like in 15 minutes, is probably better to do it right on the Uber or any other device, or any other application, because it just right there, it knows your location, etc. You really don't want to have that long conversation with your chatbot how you order your taxi. And maybe some of the scenarios when the tasks could be complex. I mean, there might be singular, like get the fastest route from A to B, but what is it fastest for you? What is it fastest for the algorithm, and so on? There's so many options and scenarios there, so it might not be the best way of, exposing that sort of behavior and using bots for that. And in general, you don't want to have bots which do everything. You want to have bots which do something specific, which they are good at. So this is just to give you an idea. If you were looking at, if you had some ideas of building your bots, so just focus on one thing which it will do very well. So there are some real-life examples now, which are largely around productivity, whether it's personal productivity, whether it's workplace productivity, traveling, personal assistance for hotels, flights, and so on. Personal finance, actually, gone a bit too far. I quite like this one. I mean, I think it's available in the US right now, Trim, but it's a really interesting idea. It actually you can upload your bank statement, and actually it can go through that, find the recurring payments you do, and actually tell you, I think you pay Netflix, every month, and then you might think, okay, maybe I'm not actually using that service. Should I cancel it? And it can cancel it for you through the text. So again, something interesting to help you to save you some money. And then retail space is a very big player for bots, because there are lots and lots of scenarios where bots could be. And people, they're trying to do some things. For instance, in the UK, I know the Domino's, they released they bot on the Facebook, I think, and you can order your pizza through that. Again, it's nothing new. I mean, they just doing it exactly the same as they do everywhere else. You can go on the website, do the same thing, but this is just a bit of fun for them and a bit of publicity. But I think we will get further, maybe this year or next year, we'll go further in what those bots could do for the retail. So how do you start? And what is the easy way, maybe? Because like I spoke to the guys earlier, so if you tried Microsoft Bot Framework 6 months ago, it was really clunky, it was really hard to use because of bits and pieces were not fit together very well. So you might have tried and I was like, okay, that just doesn't make sense to me. So how do you start? So the first demo I want to show you is actually something very, very simple. And the premise is you can build your bot in 5 minutes or so without writing any code. And but it's actually going to be a useful bot, not just hi, hello, and you send me this long message. So let me just get my. So the bot I'm going to build, is called. Well, it will be doing something around FAQs. Lots of websites, a lot of companies have the FAQs exposed. And when you search for it, sometimes you can find it quick what you need. Sometimes it takes a bit of time to actually find it. So what you're going to do is you can create your own bot. It's called Q&A Maker. And it's a part of cognitive services provided by Microsoft. And you will expose your FAQs literally in that service. So how you do it? So you need to go to this website called qnamaker.ai, and then you do create new service. You put the name, that'd be bot framework FAQ. NDC, right? And then all you need to do is you provide your FAQ page, or you can also upload a question and answer file, or you can actually build it manually, essentially. Your knowledge base can be built manually. But let's make it simple for now. So let's go literally on the Bot Framework's FAQ page. And let's just say, OK, this is where my FAQ page is. And then we do create. So what it does now, so it basically goes through that content of the page. It creates those pairs and creates that knowledge base. I mean, it's all written there. So what it has, if you look at this, I've got some bit of a crazy resolution, I think. OK, that's slightly better. So if you look here, so this was pretty much, the questions and answers, and they are all down there. So this is what we have exposed as a question and answer. Might be a bit too long for bot conversation, but again, something you can edit if needed, trim and train. And what you could do, you can go here and test your bot now. And that testing will allow users to sort of express what they are searching for in a different way, so you can train that model. And then, say for instance, let me just demo actually instead of explaining it. So basically, what is Bot Framework? You might have a user coming and checking what is Bot Framework, right? And given our knowledge base we've just loaded, so there are actually a few options around what the Bot Framework is, and you can choose and say, OK, I think this particular piece of text would be the best answer to it, right? And then also you can add alternative questions. So instead of what is Bot Framework, explain oops, why is it my postman coming? Bot Framework. You can imagine different scenarios where it's like, people who put the different variation of the same question, really. And then, for instance, we can also put, is Bot Framework. My mouse is misbehaving. Is Bot Framework. Let me delete the framework. I can't spell today. Publicly available. Sorry. And then, again, one of the answers from the knowledge base comes directly, and actually I think it's a valid answer, so we can just say, okay, that's perfect for us. So when we did a bit of a testing like that, maybe you just going through all the different questions in our knowledge base, we can just say save and train. Right? And then what we do publish. And that creates an endpoint for your bot. Essentially, what is happening, let me just click actually publishing, and then you will see. Right, so we have created an endpoint which can be used now by your application. It doesn't have to be bought, but it could be used by your application. And that's all needs to be done. And then the question has to be provided as part of that query, right? And then you can edit it. How you could now actually expose it as a bot, say on your website even. So you would need to go into one of the ways to do it. You can just go to the Azure, the resource group where you want to publish it. So let's just do that. And then you just create a new so you can create a new service. So bot service. So it's currently in preview, but hopefully it will be released soon enough. So how you create it is literally you provide your application name, because this will be your web application on Azure, really, how it is designed. So let's say Chatbot Framework NDC. Right, okay, now we're using it. So let's put it in the North Europe and create. So that'll take a few seconds to create, hopefully. So while it's creating it, and then I'll show you how you actually connect to that endpoint, let me just show you how you can talk to it, because I did it previously. So you can expose it through your, this is Skype. So we can do, well, the usual hi, hello. Let's see, first time it will pick up. Right, and then we can ask the same question, what is bot framework? And then, it will bring, that FAQ. So this is how it can be exposed into your Skype or in your internal communication tools, whatever they are. And so let me just double check. So it's, so it succeeded. So let's go now into that. Let's see, NDC. So this one. So when you create an Azure bot, using the PaaS solution, platform as a service, you have a choice of different bot options. So you can create a new bot completely blank and do whatever you want to do with that, or you can actually create a bot and point it to the Q&A service. So let me just quickly register our new bot. Okay, let me just copy that. Very important, it's shown once, you can't actually get it back again. So, and then find and go back to bot framework. So, okay. And then you select the language you'll be using, C# or Node.js. And then there are a few templates available to you. So at the moment, what we have is question answer. And then we create bot. And with this case, we can just say, OK, I have in my subscription, I have this one knowledge base, and I'd like to get that up and running. And so what will happen now, so it will provision that bot, and you will have now the choices of communicating through the web chat or actually expose it through the different channels. So we'll come back to that because it takes a few minutes. As I showed you, the that Q&A bot essentially is done in 5 minutes. And actually, if you come back next week and your boss asks you, what have you learned, you can say, OK, I've learned how to make bots. And it might take me a few days to do it, but I can do one for the company. And you just use this 10 minutes bot creator and use the rest of the time to watch the rest of the sessions. So on the bots, the stateless bot is the one we just shown, the FAQ, which is, it's very simple. It's very static. It's useful in its own way, but it's not capable of learning. It doesn't really remember anything. You come back once again, you ask the same question or similar question. It treats you like, a completely independent entity. The more interesting ones are those semi-stateful bots where you can actually track some of the basic user details. You might have an option of signing in into the bot and then do something about, then use that information about the user. You might have a tree of options, which goals they want to achieve, and you can guide those users through that conversations. You might have some limited capability to remember your user session, or if user speaks in different channels, and actually you can pick it up as well. So this is where I think a lot of useful bots will come out, or coming out right now. And the next one, which is something where the hype is, I think, is stateful bots. It's those which can recall previous conversation, those which can remember your preferences and actually, give you some recommendation based on that, have some AI capabilities, machine learning capabilities, models around that. So they are really human-like, those personal assistants, which everybody is saying that they will replace humans. So I think we are not there yet. Oops, not working. So we are not really there yet. I think there's very few good examples of how it's done. So I think we're somewhere in the middle right now. And where people start is those stateless, just bots for fun. There's some design patterns around bots. I think I've sort of already alluded to that. So the bots are really good at transactions, look up references and so on. Some of the social conversations and being able to sense sentiment within that conversation is very important. There might be examples, some of advisory role for the bots. If, for instance, you are, it's an expert system, or you're trying to understand, I don't know, I'm currently on this particular plan, with an energy company. What would be the best options for me, given that how much I pay, what's my expense of the, what's my usage of the electricity and so on. And they might guide you through the different options, or, finance, car finance, loans, etc. So that might be an option as well. And then information retrieval is some of the lookups backed by the data source, such as, FAQ bot is one of the examples, I guess. So building a good chatbot actually involves a lot of things. Quite often, we as developers start on that whole development bit. I have these bits and pieces. These are my channels where I want to expose it to. These are APIs I want to use, whether it's my internal systems or is it some of the NLP capabilities and so on. But there are lots of other things which needs to be considered, and those are, how do you actually design that conversation and that it's useful to the user, that user not getting annoyed by that if it's repeated. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, what makes a good bot. And I think we're still trying to figure out, especially you could see that there are some books being released around, the design of this. It's like, UX design, but it's for bots now, that's conversation design. Also, how can you apply your custom machine learning models, your very domain-specific machine learning models, deep learning, and so on? Where do you host your bots? And what actually do you want to do to disrupt the industry? Because this is where a lot of people are now spending time and money on how do I disrupt this industry using this new technology. And the landscape is very wide, actually, right now, and there are no particular industry standards either. And you might have tried, those of you who looked at the development tool, you might have tried with Microsoft services. You might have seen some of the Facebook development options. There are lots of other platforms which create, allow you to create bots, like some of them at the bottom, like Goop Shop, I think it's called, and then a few others. So they might be popular as well, because some of them do not require coding, so you can actually do a bit of a drag and drop and build your bot interface there. So this picture is already outdated, I think, because it's September 2016. This field moves way too fast to actually, to be able to track everything. But it just gives you an idea of what are the options. And messaging platforms, again, quite varied, and the options are lots of them. So what I want to show you in the second demo is an example of let me just bring that emulator a bit. So the second demo is just an example of, say you are a property, real estate property company in London, and you want to expose your properties. People want to go and search for it, search for rental properties, which is, if you live in the city, it's a nightmare. And say you want to do those. Oops, sorry, resolution is crazy. Okay, and I don't have anything. Oh my God. Okay, that's going to be an issue. 1 second, give me one moment. Just. Actually, while it's loading, so our bot service has been deployed. So I'll just get back quickly on the demo number 1. And here you have a web chat where you can actually talk to your bot, the one you've created. So it's already there. OK, so bot emulator. Let's just see it's all up and running. OK. I was just about to say, Microsoft has released a new amazing version of the emulator, but it takes a while to load. Sorry. It's way too good. Come on. This is not quite working, is it? All right, here we are. So if you haven't used it before, so this is the way to debug your local bot. And you can select the place where it sits in my local host at the moment. And so again, the scenario is your real estate agency in London, so people want to use bots to actually talk to your, to understand what the properties you have and how can they rent it. So, the good bot design, actually when the bot says hello, it actually explains a little bit what's its purpose. So, and maybe some of the options, so let's say with help. So this bot allows you to find some of the rented accommodation in London using Zoopla APIs and Zoopla data. And then there are a few options, so I just want to show you that you can do some guided search, you can do just a natural language queries, and also the way I built it, I actually combined it with an FAQ bot around that agency. So, and you can actually ask, just for the start, we can ask some of the questions which are related to the FAQ. So if you move to UK from a different country like I did before, you have all this, what is a DPS, what is a tenancy agreement, and all of the sort of intricacies around that. So you might actually ask, so what is DPS? Because you see this abbreviation and you're not sure. And then the bot FAQ might reply, okay, the DPS, the knowledge base this is the government standard, definition of the DPS. So if we look at the sort of examples of guided conversation or guided search, you might, you can, for instance, say, okay, let me give you a couple of options, ask you a couple of options first before I understand what you're looking for, and say what type of property. Then you can say, okay, I'm looking for a flat. And then, there could be some other questions. So how many bedrooms do you need? And then say, well, whatever I have for my money. And then maybe some other conversations you might include, until the user is annoyed. So it's better to keep it short. But say it's like, okay, show me whatever you have. Money is not an issue. And then bot can go and actually query the back end, query the internal system, the external system, whatever it is. It's essentially a data layer now. And then present some of the options to the user. And then you can, read more and then just go to the website with more detail. And then maybe you can say, okay, actually, it's not exactly what I'm looking for. And you can say, I'm looking for a 2-bedroom flat. Again, for the demo purposes, it's quite simple, but you can actually have more information around in this budget, in this area, et cetera, so this could be extended. But again, so bot will reply to you with some of the options. So these are the capabilities. And again, so this could be expanded into your website, it could be expanded to different channels. And the way you've seen, if you saw that I typed, I'm looking for a flat, you can say, I'm searching for a flat, I need a flat, and so will be going through LUIS, that language understanding service in Microsoft Toolkit, which will actually narrow it down. User is searching for a flat, and these are additional attributes it's searching for. So that's the way it works. And if I switch to the demo, to the slide deck. So the example I just shown you is using Microsoft Bot Framework. And there's a link up there if you haven't seen it yet. But it basically combines of 3 parts. So first is that Bot Builder SDK, which is the C# or Node.js application. Then you have a Bot Connector SDK, which allows you to connect your bots to various channels, text, Skype, Slack, and so on. And then you can publish your bot externally to the world through Microsoft Bot Directory. And at the moment, it's that place where you can find the different bots. I think it's that app store for bots probably will change at some point because it's really it's a lot of them are there. Not everything is working, so it needs to be curated, and so there's still work to be done. But this is the place where you can publish it, but you don't have to. You can just keep it within as a web application and just use it internally. The Bot Builder SDK is basically allows you to have, so the bot on the top is your conversation logic, which is essentially the SDK, and then anything business logic, the data access layer, and any other logic needs to be in that application. And so that is, you can build your application using C# Node.js. You host it somewhere. It's up to you where you want to host it, because in this case, it's essentially a web application. It's a web API application, so you can host it on Azure, you can host it in many other places. The SDK allows you to create the conversation dialogues, and I'll show you the code later, how those look like. And it allows you to create a variety of interaction with your bot, so whether it's through the text, whether it's rich attachments, like I've shown you, when there's a picture, there's a link, and so on. And also for Skype, there is support for calling. I think it's in preview at the moment. So Connector allows to do the major part, the routing part between your web application and your channels. So it's responsible for the state, for the registration of the bot. It keeps the information per user, per bot. There's some storage associated with that as well. So this sort of the smart part about the communication of the bot and the channels is done through the bot connector. The emulator we've already seen. So it's a cross-platform tool, and it's open source tool. And you can actually inspect your JSON response. You can send requests and receive them from your local host, as well as actually you can set it up to your remote endpoint. And so you can actually emulate various conversation through the tool. When you publish your bot, and when you want to say, okay, I want my bot available through the different channels, so there's a special part in the portal where the bot framework sits, where you can actually create that details around your bot. And then this is one of the examples of one of my other bot being available in the various channels. And again, it depends what users use and where they are, so that's what's important. Bot directory, take a look if there's something interesting you might find. Some of the examples, so Skyscanner is a really good example of travel bot, and you can actually search for your flights and I think hotels as well. Lots of silly bots there as well. There was one which unfortunately I couldn't find it now. It was make me a cup of tea or something similar, and then You ask, OK, I want to have a cup of tea. And say, there you go. This is your cup of tea. That would be it. That was the whole conversation. But, again, it was just a bit of fun. So just to show you how it all looks like in the code. So if we look, first of all, so when we actually, hold on a second. Let me just go back one moment here. So when you create, when you go into the bot framework, there is a documentation page available. And actually, the overview and the starting point is quite good because it gives you an idea of what are the prerequisites required, what version of Visual Studio, which is the SDK version, etc. So that's definitely a good place to start. And then you can create a new bot application, and in its own, it doesn't really do anything much, I would say. All it does, it sort of gets the message and says, you send me a message, and this is the length of that message. But it gives you the idea of how the scaffolding is done. And so this is the new application I've created. So again, it's a web API application, so API control is there. The important bit is that messages controller. And if you look here, so the bulk of activities is pretty much just in this post method, nothing else. So you've got when message comes in, so this is associated with activity, and then it may have various types. So it could be just a natural message from the user, but it could be also some of the system message, like if the user is deleted, or if there's a conversation update, if user is, some of the contact lists removal and adding is handled here. If user is typing, you might want to do something on on your side as well. And if he's been typing and doing it for 10 minutes, maybe you want to ask or just interact somehow. But there are lots of other options. But I think the most important one is obviously the message bit. And all we have here, we have a connector client, and which picks up the URL from where user comes from, where the activity and message comes from. And then you can, having that activity, so you can pick up the text, which would be your user message, and then do something about that. In this particular case, we just figure in the length of that text, and then just creating a reply, saying this was the text you sent, this was the length, and and we wait for another message to come in, basically. So this is what it does in a very, very, very simple case. And now I've lost my Solution Explorer. So if you look at the example I have shown you just now, so it has the same structure, so the messages control is still there. The only difference is that all I'm doing here is I'm just firing a new property dialog, because that's all my bot is doing, essentially. And all the communication is just handled there. So as I mentioned, my bot is connected to LUIS, to the cognitive services, which allows you to do the natural language processing. And it's actually integrated seamlessly with the bot framework itself. So the only thing I need to provide to tell to my code that it's LUIS needs to be checked is provide the model, the ID and the key of my model, and then create a new dialog, which is from the LUIS dialog. And when LUIS processes your text, what happens is it basically derives what are the intents of the text user sent, and whether it's and you actually in charge of that model, because you need to decide what is considered, I don't know, greetings, what is considered, I don't know, find the flat, what is considered rent a house, these sort of things, and what sort of text sentences would be used to express that intent. And so LUIS will use that, and then will create, will pass you back from that request different intent. So in this case, it's none. So there's like, Louis basically doesn't know what user sent. That's one of the options, and it's the default options. And then it might be greetings, and then when it says hi, then that's how we know it was parsed through Louis, and then we know it was greeting, then we respond with, how can I help you? If user asks something around help, and we've defined it through Louis model, then we might say, okay, I can help you with XYZ, and this is how you do it, right? And then there's a different ones, rent a flat, rent a house, etc. Just to point you quickly is, so with non-intent, by default, it's usually, this is where bot may reply, I don't know, I'm still, learning, to ask me something else, this sort of default answer. Whereas here, what I did is I actually connected to my other bot, which was my FAQ endpoint. And that's what I'm doing. So if I don't know what the user asked, so maybe I need to check my knowledge base. Maybe it's actually there. So that's how that what is DPS query has been parsed. So Louis didn't know about that. Then it's gone to the FAQ page, and it found something relevant to that. And actually, if you want to look at that, how you connected Gary Pretty, one of the MVPs, so he actually helped me literally a couple of days ago, because he just published something about the Q&A maker, his blog, literally on the 17th of January, so that was very useful, so take a look. And here as well, just to show you on finding properties, how is it, rent a flat. So when the user asks some message around, how do I get a flat? And then you might want to go into your, how do you process that query, that request? And then you might want to respond. First you might query your data access layer, however it is, with external, database, etc. And then you might want to build that, number of responses. It could be those card options. And this is what I've presented to you, with the photo and the text. So this is one of the thumbnail cards available. And it's the different ways how your bot can actually return the information back to the user. And, sorry. Okay, so what else I want to show you here? Is there any questions, actually, on that?
Where's the data coming from? How you got the Zoopla integration?
Right. So the idea of the demo was to actually go into API, because Zoopla exposes that API, so you can actually just hook to it. Yeah. I didn't quite get it working. Unfortunately, I just didn't have time. So what I did is, what I have at the back end, I have just a Azure SQL database, and I'm literally just querying the database for now. But it's a data access layer. How do you access any database or any API? That's exactly the same way. There's nothing different on that way. Yeah. Good question. Right. Okay, I think if there's no questions around code, I will just switch to to slide deck back. So how do you make your bot smart? Again, definitely look at Jen's session, because she covered all of, most of those APIs, but largely they're around language, natural language processing, translation, text analytics, around the text, your messages, your user sent, speech, maybe vision, because there's some bots which might just accept the photo and then do something about that. It might be one of the use cases. I don't know, submitting your expenses maybe might be an option, and then having an OCR, and you can think of lots of other options how you can use that Vision API. Vision API is actually, there are a few of them there. Then knowledge, search again, you might, just for the entertainment, if you have a bot, you might want to reply, with some random GIF around the particular topic or something like this. So this is one of the scenarios. So the cognitive services, they are available. Again, there's a link on the top. So they are basically the REST APIs for the outside world, but at the back end, there's a lot of machine learning algorithm and models, which Microsoft had developed for years and finally had the chance to actually expose it through those endpoints. So they can be integrated with your language and platform because it's a REST API, so it doesn't really matter what you use as your development platform and language. You can use one, you can use few of them, you can chain them together. It's really up to you. And one of the examples which are just fits in with bots, the chatbots perfectly, is that Lewis one. Again, I wouldn't go too much into detail here, but this is just for your information that, the two important bits, intents and entities. And on that, just to start wrapping up maybe, so the challenges, we have a lot of challenges around bots because with all those opportunities and possible innovations, so there's still a few questions. So first of all, we have some AI services available, AI as a service, but is it actually sufficient to support our specific domain case? Would it be enough, or do we actually need to build those machine learning backends ourselves, and do we have capability for that? User experience and how to improve it, how to make your user come back to your bot and actually use it after, for extended period of time is very important, and still I think people are struggling to understand what makes a good bot and what are designs there. The commercial models are not particularly understood right now because it's all, how do you make money out of bot? I don't know. Facebook released, they're now allowed to take payments through the bots. Again, would it be an option for some bots? I don't know. Personal assistants maybe fit in that space because, you can actually pay for that service. But again, there's a lot of discussions going on, and it's a challenge right now. And the security is a very big piece right now because it's messaging platform. What kind of private data can you send? Where is it stored? How is it being treated? It's still there. So I hope you've learned something today. There are a few things I just put on the slides, so about the history around the challenges. I think the opportunities are the most important, that bots are very good at specific tasks, and they are fairly simple to build if you are just focused on that task rather than trying to build for every single use case and trying to solve every single problem, because that's not what they're designed for. And good use cases for companies might be starting with the internal systems rather than going bang on with the customer service to the whole world, because internal systems, you have a smaller set of users, you can fail and it's okay, people will actually understand that. Whereas if you go outside, it might be some reputational damage if you don't do a good job. And yeah, so some of the industry-specific bots will definitely be coming more and more, like a CRM bots or some other things happening. And 2017, this is just a few headlines I think I found on the weekend. So everybody's talking, this is again the new year of the bots. Killer bots, bots trends to watch. So I think this will be still very important, and you should watch this space definitely, and maybe try to build, your own killer bot, and see if you can make money out of it.
How do you make money out of it?
Me personally. Well, that's the thing. So nobody really knows yet. People are trying to figure out. But you have to keep track of the space because there might be some good ideas floating around. Thank you very much. My name is Galiya Warrier. I'm a data solution architect in the Microsoft Azure team. And these are my contact details if you have any questions. Thank you.